Resident Evil 3, Nemesis, is a survival horror video game and the third installment in the Resident Evil series developed and published by Capcom. The game was initially released for the Sony PlayStation and was subsequently ported to the Dreamcast, Microsoft Windows, and Nintendo GameCube. It is also available for download on the PlayStation Network for use with both the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation Portable. The game's storyline is divided into two parts. The first half takes place 24 hours before the events of Resident Evil 2, while the second half occurs 2 days after. Through this, the game expands upon the settings and events of the T-virus outbreak in Raccoon City and provides a conclusion to the fate of the city and its infected population. On Sunday, September 27, 1998, Jill Valentine attempts to escape a ruined and zombie-infested Raccoon City, but she realizes that she must fight her way out of the city, which has been reduced to complete chaos. After almost being eaten in her initial escape attempt, she makes her way into a warehouse with a man named Dario Rosso, where they wait it out for another day before she finally gives up on waiting for a rescue party. Dario refuses to leave and locks himself in a crate. By chance, she stumbles onto Brad Vickers, saving him from a zombie attack, although he is bitten. He warns her of an unknown threat and tells her they won't make it out because he's after STAR's members. There's no escape. Before heading to Raccoon Police Station, Jill follows, searching for a way out of the city. Brad runs to the station after her, warning her to run. However, he is then overpowered and killed by the threat he mentioned previously, the Nemesis T-type. She escapes 2 encounters with the monster in the station and heads downtown to find the source of an emergency radio transmission coming through the STAR's office communication system. She comes across the source, a mercenary named Corporal Carlos Oliveira, who works for Umbrella's Biohazard Countermeasure Service. Jill initially doesn't trust him, as he works for the company that caused the disaster in the first place. After helping her survive another encounter with the Nemesis, she begins to trust him. Carlos mentions that there was an escape plan set in place as a contingency in case their mission failed. A helicopter is to land near the St. Michael Clock Tower once its bell is rung by evacuating mercenaries. To get to the clock tower, Carlos, Sergeant Nikolai Zinoviev, and Captain Mikhail Victor, who is injured, plan on using a tram to reach the tower rather than the dangerous roads outside. The tram doesn't work, so Jill and Carlos have to find the materials needed to get the tram working again. Nikolai is apparently lost during their search. Once the materials are collected, they proceed on the tram and are attacked by the Nemesis. Mikhail sacrifices himself for his squad mates and detonates an incendiary grenade, which knocks the Nemesis out of the tram. The tram loses balance and crashes, luckily into the outside wall of the clock tower. Jill and Carlos manage to ring the bell after solving several puzzles. Unfortunately, the helicopter is shot down by the Nemesis, forcing Jill and Carlos to fight him. The Nemesis is defeated, collapsing in a fire after his rocket launcher self-destructs due to Carlos' gunfire. But during the fight, Jill is infected with the T-virus. Carlos takes her to a chapel within the clock tower for safety. Later that week, on October 1st, Carlos heads to the nearby Raccoon General Hospital to find a way to cure Jill's infection. Carlos encounters another UBCS operative, Tyrell Patrick, who has been shot by Nikolai, revealing him as a traitor. He then tries to open a safe booby-trapped with explosives. After creating a T-virus vaccine from Umbrella machinery and samples, Carlos heads back to Jill. Unaware of what Nikolai has been doing while he was preparing the sample, he is surprised to find that C4 plastic explosives have been planted around the hospital. He manages to escape the building before it is destroyed. When Carlos injects Jill with the vaccine, the T-virus in Jill's body is put into a dormant state and is not destroyed as she believes. And together they head to the nearby public park, hoping to find a new route of escape. Jill finds a small hut in Raccoon Park Cemetery with a secret room, which is being used as a base of operations for the supervisors. The body of a monitor is found nearby with a bullet in his head, indicating that Nikolai has beaten them there, though Jill is unaware of his treachery. Jill reads a file that explains to the supervisors that Umbrella cannot lobby for more time any longer, and that Raccoon City would be destroyed in a missile attack. Jill leaves, but as she does, a message is sent through the radio system, telling the deceased operator that the mission has been terminated and that all survivors are to return to base. Nikolai then reveals himself to Jill and prepares to kill her. But a grave digger below ground makes Nikolai leave in a hurry. Jill manages to kill the giant worm and discovers a route to a factory, which turns out to be a waste disposal facility for Umbrella. She and Carlos meet up and find out that there is a way out of the city, a helipad with a chopper on it. Unknowingly stumbling into the waste processing room, Jill is locked in with the nemesis and must defeat him to recover a keycard to escape. Leaving just in time, the nemesis body is released into a pit containing corrosive acid. Depending on choices made by the player before reaching the facility, the chopper can either be piloted by Carlos and Jill escapes with him, or Nikolai beats them to it. If Nikolai steals it, he and Jill exchange words, with Nikolai taunting them that they won't be leaving and they will die when a thermobaric missile is launched due to impact in a couple of minutes. The player also has the choice of destroying the chopper or attempting to negotiate with Nikolai. Either way, they will not be leaving with that helicopter. As Jill heads to the helipad, the radar receiver she picks up alerts her to the approaching missile, and at this point, the player has 15 minutes to find a way to escape. Jill heads to the helipad but encounters the nemesis one final time, heavily mutated after previous defeats. She defeats it using a large railgun and a magnum. Jill and Carlos both reach the helipad, at a loss of what to do as the sun rises over the city. Another helicopter lands and rescues them, the pilot being Barry Burton, Jill's colleague from Resident Evil 1. The city's final fate is resolved in the game's finale. The government, after hearing of unsuccessful efforts to avert the T-virus infestation, completely destroys Raccoon City with a thermobaric missile strike. The Raccoon Police Station was the headquarters of the Raccoon Police Department, a municipal police force in and around Raccoon City. This building was located on Ennerdale Street in downtown Raccoon City. The Raccoon Police Department, RPD, bought the building, which originally belonged to the Raccoon Art Museum, in the 1980s and turned it into the city's police station. When the T-virus contaminated the drinking water in September 1998, tens of thousands transformed into zombies within hours, and the police were called into duty, with many rallying at the station to defend it. In the early hours, the police station took in many civilians as refugees, including Sherry Birkin. On September 25th, having gone insane, Chief Irons ordered for the police station's weapons locker to be emptied and weapons and ammunition scattered throughout. Due to these orders, police took casualties in the fighting against zombie intruders due to ammunition shortages. On September 26th, dozens of officers, including SWAT, were sent out of the station altogether to engage the zombies head-on, and were massacred as a result. Those left inside endured further attacks on the station on the 27th, and faced lickers, mutations of the zombies they failed to kill. On September 28th, the officers were attacked in their operations conference room and took serious casualties, including David Ford, who may have been their senior. The survivors began drawing up plans to escape through the sewers, and Lieutenant Marvin Branagh helped Rita Phillips escape through a secret tunnel in a plan to call over a rescue van. When Harry did arrive, however, the station had been attacked again and Branagh was too injured to join them. Later that day, former stars, Officers Jill Valentine and Brad Vickers attempted to find shelter in the station, but were attacked by the Nemesis T-Type, a BOW sent by Umbrella Europe to kill them. By September 29th, the only personnel left were Chief Irons, Lieutenant Branagh, and Elliot Edward. Sherry Birkin and Ben Bertolucci were left as the sole remaining civilians, the former due to her small size allowing her to use ducks, and the latter due to being sealed in a prison cell. That night, RPD rookie Leon S. Kennedy, college student Claire Redfield, and spy Ada Wong entered the police station for their own reasons, and witnessed the deaths of the last officers. On September 30th, USS Agent Hunk entered the police station to rendezvous with a helicopter at the front gate. On October 1st, the precinct was decimated along with the rest of the city due to the sterilization operation carried by the United States Air Force on the orders of the U.S. President. Originally an art museum, the building was refurbished into the department's HQ in the late 80s, mostly because of its central location, downtown Raccoon City, and an ample parking garage. During the renovation, some museum features were left intact, the goddess statue being the most noticeable. Among those features was a system of air ducts, commonly used in museums to maintain humidity inside the building to preserve works of art. The building itself was highly decorated with different art pieces. Some of these pieces were remnants left behind from the museum. In addition, a number of expensive art pieces were further added after the renovation, purchased by Chief Irons. The building was 3 stories tall and includes a clock tower and basement. The main entrance of the precinct faced Ennerdale Street, one of the city's primary thoroughfares. The back entrance facing Flower Street served as the entrance to the building's underground parking. There were a number of similarities between the precinct and Umbrella Spencer Mansion, most notably the use of intricate keys and locks as well as several puzzles, effectively transforming the building into a large maze. The sales office is an area of Uptown District of Raccoon City is a pharmaceutical company sales office run by Umbrella. The substation is an area of Raccoon City's downtown district, a rather claustrophobic power station with a large control panel and several monitoring rooms. Several wires were jury-rigged to the station's central power transmitter control panel, likely by the staffs to divert power and electrify the gate, in an attempt to barricade themselves from the horrors that lurk around the streets just outside. The St. Michael Clock Tower was a clock tower in Raccoon City. A major landmark in its tourism industry, the clock tower was located in the north side of the city, close to Raccoon General Hospital and Raccoon Park. Named after St. Michael the Archangel, the wider building was religious in nature and included a chapel. The building was destroyed in the 1998 Raccoon City destruction incident. The St. Michael's Clock Tower was first erected in the year 1908, founded by the clergy and donations of philanthropists of the adjacent St. Michael's Church. St. Michael Clock Tower was founded in honor of the children of the then flourishing Raccoon City in 1908, and originally was an elementary school in its grounded interiors. Though the school had eventually grown to a yearly student body of 600 in its enrollment and was able to immediately incorporate newly founded civil features like electricity, building inspections would deem its aged infrastructure too old and dangerous for general occupancy by 1978. For 15 years, the clock tower and its grounds would remain off-limits and accessible only to city officials and the clergy of St. Michael's Church, until the initialization of the Bright Raccoon 21 plan by Mayor Michael Warren and the Umbrella Corporation, which would renovate and reopen the old clock tower to more suitable and structurally sound conditions. Since 1993, St. Michael Clock Tower would once again become Raccoon City's signature landmark and city symbol, and a celebrated place by both tourists and local citizens alike, with an annual St. Michael's Festival celebrated on its grounds around September. It was also reopened at that same year. As the T-virus ravaged Raccoon City in September 1998, the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service had orders to take control of the clock tower for use as a helicopter evacuation point. The UBCS was successful in the hours after arrival on September 26, though the number of injured personnel and refugees made it appear more of an aid station. Over the next few days, the irregular mutants took control of the building once more, and by September 28 this had been taken over by giant spiders. Later that night, the building was explored by Corporal Carlos Oliveira and STARS Officer Jill Valentine, who had heard of the evac site. Though they were successful in alerting the helicopter, it was destroyed by the Nemesis T-type and crashed into the tower. The remains of the clock tower were destroyed on the morning of October 1st when the city was hit by a thermobaric bomb. Prior to the outbreak, this ornate Gothic clock tower was a popular tourist attraction featuring postcards of the city. The base of the tower was lavishly furnished and presumably occupied at one point, as it included a small chapel, library, living room, and a bedroom besides the more functional mechanical rooms in the tower itself. The tower was secured with several locks and puzzles featuring a timekeeping theme. The clock tower consisted of 13 rooms. Raccoon General Hospital, also referred to simply as Raccoon Hospital, was the primary medical facility serving Raccoon City. It functioned as the city's main hospital and was the only known healthcare institution still operational during the T-virus outbreak of 1998. The hospital was constructed in 1992 as part of Mayor Michael Warren's urban redevelopment initiative, known as the Bright Raccoon 21 project. The initiative received substantial financial backing from the Umbrella Corporation, which publicly promoted itself as a clean company. Collusion with Umbrella. Through a covert agreement with the hospital's director, Umbrella secured permission to operate a private laboratory on the facility's second basement level. While local newspapers reported on bribery allegations involving a pharmaceutical company, the presence of the underground laboratory remained undisclosed to the public. To preserve the secrecy of Umbrella's operations, Personnel avoided surface routes and relied on subterranean travel. In the case of the hospital, laboratory representatives were instructed to access the site via sewer tunnels using a boat, particularly during internal committee meetings. On September 23, the previously localized T-virus outbreak escalated into a full-scale citywide crisis following a violent riot that broke out during a football game at Warren Stadium. In response, martial law was declared the following day, and the state's National Guard sealed off Raccoon City entirely. To prevent panic, authorities issued a public cover story, attributing the quarantine to a radiation spill. Amidst the chaos, a colony of leeches infected by the T-virus escaped from the B2F laboratory, presumably transferring from the deceased researcher's body to another host. Demonstrating rapid learning capabilities, the leeches began using the building's ventilation system to move freely and encountered minimal resistance. Their presence and activities within the building were documented over a span of at least 3 days by an unnamed male nurse, whose diary provides a first-hand account of the situation. The remained hospital staff continued to work on a treatment while the city came down on them and their building became progressively less safe. To aid in their vaccine research, several Hunter gamma BOWs were successfully captured and placed in storage on level B3F. While the staff were ultimately successful in creating a T-virus vaccine, the situation had deteriorated to such an extent no one was left to use it. The head doctor himself perished on September 26 as zombies invaded the doctor's station as the hospital succumbed to the undead. A helicopter evacuation was scheduled to retrieve refugees from the rooftop, as noted by RPD Officer Arthur. However, the extraction never took place. Surviving staff on floor 3F huddled together at the nurses' center, but eventually lost to the mutants, among whom Dr. Scott Jones. Dr. Hirsch aided a group of survivors stranded on the floor by restoring power, but was soon after attacked by the leeches that smelt his injured hand. This group of survivors made their way down into level B2F where they killed Hirsch and his leech controllers, and later the giant leech as they made their escape through the sewers and likely towards Umbrella's underground laboratory. In the days that followed, the ground floor of the hospital was taken over by a pack of Hunter Beta, who killed several Delta Force soldiers to maintain that control. In the early hours of October 1st, Umbrella monitors Sergeant Nikolai Zinoviev and Tyrell Patrick entered the hospital after Umbrella became aware of the hospital employees' research, and each received orders to destroy the hospital. They were soon followed by Corporal Carlos Oliveira, who needed the vaccine to treat STARS. Officer Jill Valentine. Corporal Oliveira narrowly escaped the hospital with the vaccine as Sergeant Zinoviev destroyed it with C4 charges. The hospital was a 4-story structure topped with a rooftop helipad for emergency landings. Mounted on the roof was a large metal sign reading Raccoon Hospital, which showed visible signs of aging, including extensive rust. The first floor consisted primarily of administrative offices and employee areas, while the right wing contained clinics and several patient rooms. The building's interior was characterized by narrow hallways and limited vertical access, with only a single small elevator and one staircase connecting all levels. The first basement, B1F, included a morgue, an elevator control room, and a liquid waste disposal facility. The second basement, B2F, housed a concealed Umbrella laboratory and a direct access passage to the city's sewer system. The third basement, B3F, contained additional Umbrella equipment and a chemical synthesizer used in the production of one of the 3 known T-virus vaccines, created shortly before the city was destroyed by the U.S. government's sterilization strategy. A fourth basement, B4F, and fifth basement, B5F, are mentioned in a texture for the Hive's elevator, but never actually explored. Raccoon Park was an urban park located in Raccoon City, serving as a popular attraction for residents through various events, one notable example being a jazz festival. The park was situated in the northern part of the city, near the Clock Tower and Raccoon Hospital. The circular river flowed eastward, separating the park from the Dead Factory. While relatively small in size, Raccoon Park included several distinct features. The southern section served as a plaza where citizens could gather for social events, while the northern area housed the park's cemetery. To the east, a pathway wound through ponds and led to a suspension bridge, adding a scenic element to the park's layout. The park also featured a small cemetery that conducted funerals until September 1998. Unbeknownst to the public, many of the interred were infected with the T-virus. Several victims had fallen into comas induced by the virus and were mistakenly declared dead. On October 1, 1998, some of these individuals turned into zombies and were able to dig their way out of their graves. Incineration Disposal Plant P12A was a biological waste processing facility owned and operated by the Umbrella Corporation. It was located in the industrial zone in northeastern Raccoon City. The facility was used for the safe disposal of bio-waste left over from experiments at Raccoon's underground laboratory, a nearby laboratory complex, and not only used the latest breakthroughs in bio-waste disposal, but also provided employees with antiretroviral drugs to prevent infection due to their high-risk duties. The facility was disguised as an abandoned warehouse near a scrapyard, and may even have been refurbished from one. This facade allowed it in theory to keep out spies, though guards were kept on standby to kill urban explorers happening upon their work, or otherwise sending them to the underground lab for experimentation. A subway station privately owned by the company was located nearby, which was to allow for the transport of personnel, though where it lay is unknown. During the 1998 Raccoon City destruction incident, Plant P12A was the site of a battle between a Delta Force unit and a group of tyrants shortly before. Umbrella's need for a dedicated bio-waste disposal facility came about in the 1990s with the increasing number of experiments performed at Nest which, while prioritizing research on the Golgotha virus, also performed research on T-virus strains. Due to the enormous use of test subjects, Umbrella began construction of a separate site which could take over functions, with biohazardous material likely being transported via Umbrella's private subway. The facility used a variety of gases and medicines to destroy evidence of BOW research. In the event material was present which could not be destroyed in the treatment pool, an incinerator was used as a means of drawing power. The factory was constructed in 1998 and was already crewed by its staff for at least 19 days when building was finished on May 14. The primary provider of waste was the Nest, which it was connected to by subway. Its chief researcher, Dr. William Birkin, started producing more waste than the P12A plant could process. Only a month after waste processing began, the machinery was being used far more frequently than they were designed for and their condition began to degrade. The machinery finally began to fall apart in mid-July, resulting in a dramatic loss of functionality. The T-virus began to mutate into new strains with the bodies left undisposed. The staff soon found the T-virus antibodies they were provided with had no effect on the new strain and began transforming into zombies in late July. The bodies of several researchers were subsequently taken to the processing room to be disposed of if the machinery was repaired. With the facility's computer programmed to shut the factory down in the event of a quarantine, the uninfected staff were sealed in with no hope for escape, allowing Birkin to quietly abandon them with justification. The facility was left abandoned until late September 1998, when the U.S. Army's Delta Force arrived at the facility. Having entered Umbrella's private subway line with the intent of infiltrating Nest, the unit was unfamiliar with the tunnels and found themselves several miles away. UBCS Commander Colonel Sergei Vladimir ordered a helicopter to drop 5 T-103 Tyrants to deny them access to sensitive materials. The T-103s and the Delta Force unit mutually destroyed one another, partly with the aid of the U.S. Army's experimental anti-BOW rail cannon, Sword of Paracelsus. On October 1st, the facility was visited by a number of people seeking a means of escape. UBCS Sergeant Nikolai Zinoviev stole a helicopter from the scrapyard to rendezvous with Umbrella contacts. Stars. Officer Jill Valentine fought Umbrella Europe's Nemesis T-type BOW in the facility's processing room and managed to power the machinery to begin another treatment. This, however, only succeeded in destroying the tyrant shell and forced the nemesis parasite to mutate in the virally enriched fluid. It was finally destroyed soon after by Valentine with the revolver of a dead Delta Force operative after the sword incapacitated him. Minutes later, the facility was destroyed along with the rest of the city following the execution of the sterilization operation. The brain sucker is the result of an arthropod suffering a secondary infection from the T-virus. It is a close relative of the drain dimos. These creatures were birthed from arthropods that had been infected sometime during the Raccoon City destruction incident. They were seen in Raccoon City and incineration disposal plant P12A, which had been infested by the T-virus even before the G-virus capture mission which led to a widespread infestation of the city. The baby flea, tentative, is an unnamed offspring that is born when a drain dimos lays an egg. They were only seen in the Raccoon City destruction incident in 1998. Unlike their parents, the baby fleas were not caused by accidental mutation, but instead created through natural birth after their parents were exposed to the T-virus. However, due to the viral strain, these creatures are significantly larger than a normal offspring would have been, being roughly the size of a human's shoe. Giant spider is a blanket term used for any spider that has been infected due to the T-virus in an unplanned manner, an irregular mutant. They are different from the web spinner in the sense that the web spinner BOW were experimented from the start, while the wild spiders simply mutated on contact. The giant spiders, like other T-virus-infected spiders, produce little spiders, which live on their mother's back. If the back of the giant spider wasn't blasted by powerful weapons, little spiders won't appear. Unlike the web spinner, these irregular mutant spiders had kept the ability to create a web for trapping prey, which logically made them much more akin to the black tiger. The giant spiders frequented in the sewers of Raccoon City, where they were infected during the Raccoon City destruction incident when the T-virus was leaked into the sewers. In a similar manner, giant spiders populated the sewers of Sheena Island 2 months later during its own viral outbreak, when T-virus-laced chemicals mixed into the sewage. Baby spiders are the offspring of any spider infected with the T-virus. They would live on the back of their mothers and attack nearby foes if she was killed. Like other arthropods, little spider blood contains hemocyanin, creating a green hue, so it is possible to see a green spot on the floor after killing them by single shot or by stepping on them. Crows are a genus of highly intelligent birds with populations spanning from Eurasia to the Americas. After the Raccoon City destruction incident caused by Queen Leech in the Arkley Mountains region, many crows became infected with the T-virus after consuming smaller, infected animals. Unlike other animals infected by the T-virus, crows showed no visible signs of infection aside from their increased size. If threatened, however, they would attack their prey in a flock. Otherwise, they were harmless. It was through the crows that Stars, Bravo team member Forrest Spire, became infected with the T-virus. Infected crows would appear again after Raccoon City had become completely infected by the T-virus. These crows were noticeably more aggressive than the ones found at the Arkley laboratory, attacking anything they saw. A single crow managed to bring down Ed, a trained UBCS mercenary. Zombie dog is a term referring to domesticated canines infected with the T-virus through its secondary method, namely the ingestion of infected food or organisms. It should be noted that they are separate from the Cerberuses. The latter was created specifically as a bioorganic weapon, while zombie dogs are viewed and treated as unintended side effects of T-virus dispersal and are thus classified as irregular mutants. Like their BOW relatives, the zombie dogs retain much of their former agility with a noticeable increase in durability and aggression. In most cases, potential prey should listen for the sound of padding paws as a clue to their presence, with a growling warning that it has become aware of prey and is preparing to attack. They will let out a pained yelp when killed. Akin to the canine-related T-virus mutation is a general necrosis in their left eye orbit, leaving their left eye visible bulge out of their otherwise savage but proportional facade, making for an even more fearsome appearance. The drain dimos, commonly abbreviated as DD, are parasites which have been infected and mutated by the T-virus. Their only confirmed sighting was during the Raccoon City destruction incident, in which they were infected by feeding on blood from zombies. Like many other arthropods, the fleas responded to the virus by dramatically increasing in size, strength, and aggression. As is common with T-virus creations, the drain dimos takes its name from mythology, in this case Deimos, the Greek personification of dread. They bear many similarities with the chimera, both in physiology and strength/weakness, but are much larger in scale compared to the chimera, making evasive maneuvers more difficult. Fortunately, however, they lack their predecessor's tendency to aim for their intended victim's jugular. The gravedigger is an irregular mutant resulting from an arthropod exposed to massive doses of the mutagenic T-virus. The origins of the gravediggers lie with the excessive research and dumping of T-virus test subjects at Nest which, when too much for incineration disposal plant P12A to handle, led to the virus contaminating the nearby soil and infecting underground-dwelling organisms, former stars. Officer Jill Valentine encountered a white grave digger when the ground subsided and found herself in the sewers it was burrowing through. Later, she encountered a brown grave digger in Raccoon Park. Desperate for a supply of food, it had smelt out buried corpses and some zombies buried alive in the park's cemetery. Its attempt to burrow under each coffin led to the ground collapsing. This gravedigger was killed by Jill. The Hunter Beta, development code MA121, was a prototype model developed by Umbrella USA for the Hunter line of bioorganic weapons, designed as a derivative of the earlier Alpha model. The Hunter Beta was developed to improve upon Birkin's Hunter Alpha work, due to Umbrella's ability to clone BOW. At a low cost, they were free to continue making further genetic modifications to the Hunter Alpha, focusing on improving the Hunter's performance abilities. While its attack power was reduced in the process, its nervous system was improved, decreasing reaction time when being shot at. In September 1998, Umbrella was preparing final tests of the Hunter Beta before they could make the final decision on whether or not to mass-produce it. Taking advantage of the situation in Raccoon City later in the month, approximately 20 of the Hunters were shipped to the United States and transported by truck into Raccoon City, where the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service and their monitors were to test and record the creature's performance. The Hunter Gamma, development code MA124, model of Hunter was developed by Umbrella Europe as part of a reinvestigation into amphibian-based BOW, which failed 10 years earlier with Dr. Marcus Lurker. It was nicknamed the Frogger by its development team. The Hunter Gamma was developed based on information retrieved from the American branch's Hunter Alpha model. Contrary to the American design method, the Hunter Gamma involved human DNA being bonded with a fertilized amphibian egg with the T-virus. Though this method worked, the resulting creatures had several flaws that made them impractical for battlefield use, such as a sensitivity to heat and their vulnerable mandibles being exposed when they attacked a target. In 1998, Umbrella ordered the destruction of numerous batches of this variant due to its perceived uselessness as a weapon. One researcher who had grown emotionally attached to the Hunters under his care defied this order, and bribed a sewer manager in Raccoon City to allow him and some of his associates to move the Hunters there to continue training and evaluation. He hoped to prove their worth and bargain with Umbrella's European branch to continue development. Though they were docile and friendly to the researcher and his associates, they effortlessly and violently killed at least 2 random sewer workers that happened to stumble upon them. These Hunters were still in the sewer during the Raccoon City destruction incident. At least 2 of them were captured and sedated by the Raccoon General Hospital staff. Carlos Oliveira, a corporal in the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, inadvertently released them while trying to synthesize a T-virus reagent for Jill Valentine. By October 1st, a pack had established their hunting ground in a pond at Raccoon Park. A clawless version of the Gamma was also being stored in the water treatment facility underneath Raccoon University at the same time. Quickly breaking out of their storage capsules also on October 1st, these Hunters reacted well to the damp, subterranean environment and the pools of water in the plant. While being considered improper for a BOW due to the conditions necessary for survival, Umbrella nonetheless continued to sell the Gamma model as late as 2002, where a number were sold into the hands of Javier Hidalgo. Additionally, by May 2002 there was at least 1 other subspecies of Gamma created, albeit accidentally. At Umbrella's Atlantic Waste Disposal Facility, a preference by management for accelerating research over worker safety or facility maintenance resulted in the creation of the Glimmer variety of Hunter, which escaped into the flooded lower levels of the facility. Named for their luminous red eyes, these creatures gained the ability to vomit powerful acid on their opponents, at the cost of being sensitive to light. This subspecies was subsequently rendered extinct when the facility was destroyed in September 2002. Zombies are humans afflicted with the cannibal disease, an illness caused by the T-virus, a bioweapon originally developed by Dr. James Marcus, one of the founding members of the Umbrella Corporation. Despite having minimal organ function and a deceased-like appearance, these creatures are not reanimated corpses but living humans who have been infected and transformed by the virus mutations. During his trials with the T-virus, Dr. James Marcus began to consider the impact that human testing would have on his research, eventually forcing people into being guinea pigs for his secret bioweapons projects. The result of these trials was the very first of the zombies. It would appear that information regarding Marcus' deeds only surfaced during the 1998 investigation into his laboratory, which had been quickly abandoned 10 years prior when he was murdered. The investigation revealed no less than 20 people as test subjects. Sliding worms are the parasitic offspring produced by grave diggers. They were encountered by survivors during the Raccoon City destruction incident. The gravedigger reproduces by laying eggs in the sewers and inside the ground, often in bunches of 100. Under these infected conditions, these eggs soon hatch, often in 2 hours, and the resulting creature is known as the sliding worm. These larvae are another kind of irregular mutant, usually growing to about 1 meter in length and possess sharp fangs and an elastic, flexible body. These creatures thrive on blood, and when they spot prey, they will leap towards it with amazing jumping power and suck blood from it like a leech, sometimes as much as 1 liter. After being born, they will shed their skin many times in the course of their development. In the span of 1 week, they will be a fully formed gravedigger. Nemesis T-Type was a series of experimental bio-organic weapons created by Umbrella Europe's No. 6 laboratory, and was the culmination of the Nemesis project, involving the successful implantation of any alpha parasites within T103 hosts, presenting Umbrella with a highly intelligent and powerful creature. Several Nemesis T-Types were produced, though only one, Nemesis T02, is known to have experienced combat. This individual was sent in Raccoon City and nicknamed the Pursuer. Umbrella Pharmaceuticals' ultimate goal was the creation of bio-organic weaponry to sell to the U.S. Army and, through accumulated revenue, fund its own eugenics program. A major flaw found during the T-Virus project was that subpar intelligence was an almost unavoidable side effect and, as a result, R&D projects typically ruled against the practicality of uncontrollable BOW on the battlefield. Though the Hunter project was promising, the clone species intelligence was still limited to understanding no more than 10 commands. To become truly military-grade, Umbrella needed to develop BOW with near or like human intelligence. By 1988, Umbrella USA and Umbrella Europe were competing to do just this. Umbrella USA's Arkley Laboratory set up the Tyrant Project, which aimed to create human mutants without loss of intelligence. Umbrella Europe's No. 6 laboratory, meanwhile, began the Nemesis Project, which aimed to create parasitic organisms that would take over cerebral functions within a BOW host. Both projects reached impasses for years, with the Tyrant Project lacking results for most of the next decade until the completion of T002, and the Nemesis Project finding no hosts which could survive the procedure. By the summer of 1998, Umbrella USA had successfully created not only the T002, but a series of genetically altered clones dubbed the T103s. The destruction of the Arkley Laboratory following a biological disaster presented Umbrella with fresh concerns as to the reliability of its products after it emerged that the RPD STARS unit had not only succeeded in killing the failed and outdated prototypes, but the T002 itself. Restarting the Nemesis project, Umbrella Europe requisitioned several of the new T103 clones to serve as test subjects. The Alpha parasites implanted within their bodies succeeded in hijacking brain functions without killing the hosts. Soon after this procedure, however, at least 2 of the Nemesis T-types demonstrated completely unexpected senses of ego and self-awareness, and made an attempt to escape from their laboratory. When Umbrella got word of a T-virus outbreak in Raccoon City, Umbrella Europe began shipping its BOW into the city to take advantage of the crisis. Per HQ's plan, the UBCS were to engage these BOW, and monitors in the city were instructed to record the BOW combat skills to verify their reliability as military products. With Umbrella wanting vengeance for the destruction of T002, Nemesis T02 was instructed to hunt down and kill STARS, members of whom it was shown photographs so they could be recognized. It was taken into the city by helicopter and provided with heavy weaponry including a rocket launcher. When the pursuer entered the city, only 2 STARS members were left, Brad Vickers and Jill Valentine. The first target it tracked down was Vickers, on or before the night of September 28. Vickers was able to alert Valentine, and the pursuer ultimately failed to kill Vickers, either losing track of him completely or with him being wounded and mutating into a zombie regardless. Its attention focused instead on Valentine, and alongside several ambushes in downtown Raccoon City, also covertly observed Valentine making contact with surviving UBCS mercenaries, which it considered secondary targets. One of these targets was Sergeant Nikolai Zinoviev, a monitor who had been tasked with evaluating the pursuer's prowess. Fearing for his life, he faked his death in the hope his meeting with Valentine was not noticed. Later in the night, the pursuer made its move on Valentine when a downtown train or tram she was sheltering in departed. The attempt on her life failed, and Captain Mikhail Victor seriously wounded it in a suicide bombing, and the parasite secretions promoted mutation as a means of recovering. Accounts differ as to the pursuer's actions following the failed attack, but in any case, it confronted Valentine outside the St. Michael clock tower and failed again, though succeeded in infecting her with a strain of T-virus. In one account, this confrontation happened after it downed a UBCS Chinook with a rocket launcher, and was forced back by Corporal Carlos Oliveira before passing out in the flaming ruins. In another, this confrontation was immediately after escaping the derelict train, and Oliveira arrived after its defeat. In spite of its injuries, the pursuer survived, albeit in a considerably deformed and mentally primitive state compared with when it arrived in the city. There are altogether two distinct accounts of the pursuer's actions in the city on October 1st. In two accounts, the pursuer followed Valentine to incineration disposal plant P12A. They were separated after one fell off a bridge. Following this, it may have spotted and killed Zinoviev, though there is evidence to suggest he escaped unharmed. While fighting Valentine in a treatment room, it was exposed to highly corrosive chemicals which destroyed the tyrant. The surviving parasite then mutated out of control and dragged the remains of its host out into a scrap yard where it was mortally wounded by a U.S. Army experimental railgun, the sword of Paracelsus, and either succumbed to its wounds minutes later, or was shot repeatedly by Valentine. Jill Valentine is a member of STARS. In the early 1990s, Valentine served in the United States Army and got the attention of recruiters for Delta Force, the nation's primary counterterrorism unit. Although the unit does not enlist women, Valentine was allowed to take part in the 6-month intensive operator training course, where she excelled in bomb disposal and lockpicking and was known for her delicate and nimble though precise dexterity, as well as resilience, courage, and discernment amid danger. This experience made Valentine one of the only women in the world with Delta Force training, capable of dismantling even the most intricate explosives in a matter of minutes. During her time in the U.S. Army, she met fellow soldier Forrest Spire, who she would later work with more closely. She left the military in pursuit of experiences that made her feel alive, as well as to assuage her sense of justice and intolerance for those who harm innocent people. Sometime in 1996, Valentine was recruited by Albert Westgear for the Special Tactics and Rescue Service, STARS, an elite unit of Raccoon Police Department, RPD, that relied on military veterans and weapons-trained scientists to solve serious crimes in Raccoon City. Despite keeping her Special Forces training and personal life a secret, she made friends with several STARS members during this time, including Chris Redfield, with whom she developed a close friendship and partnership, and under whom she often demanded to be trained in marksmanship. By July 1998, Valentine became the only woman to join Captain Westgear's Alpha Team, as the team's BNE specialist, positioned at the rear in maneuvers with STARS helicopter pilot Brad Vickers. Carlos Oliveira was a mercenary for the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, UBCS. He held the rank of corporal and served in their Delta platoon as rear security for Alpha Squad, where he was also their heavy weapons specialist. Oliveira is also one of the few survivors of the deployed squads who served during Raccoon City destruction incident. While the nation of Oliveira's origin has not been established, what is known is that it underwent fierce paramilitary and street violence from the 1970s to 1990s. Oliveira grew up in a large mestizo household as the fifth of 7 brothers. By his birth around 1977, the oldest 2 had already been killed in fighting between street gangs. Around 1982, Oliveira's house was raided by a rival street gang, who shot his brother Tonio as retribution for a slaying by his older brother, Pedro. Oliveira first became involved in gang violence around 1984 at the age of 7, when he was able to handle a shotgun which he used for committing robberies. Around 1987, he was captured by a nationalist paramilitary group while trespassing on a farm intent to loot it. His life was saved by a communist group backed by Cuba or the Soviet Union, and welcomed him into their front. Through his teenage years, Oliveira was trained in guerrilla techniques and rose to become a prominent and dedicated guerrilla leader, and was experienced with handling Soviet heavy weapons. By the 1990s, however, the conflict was waning as the government was more capable in asserting itself. The Communist Front was wiped out in an anti-guerrilla operation, and Oliveira himself was captured. Brad Vickers was a member of the Raccoon Police Department STARS Alpha Team. Vickers wasn't much of a fighter, and it is not mentioned as to whether or not he had served in any combat capacity before his recruitment into the STARS unit. He appears to have served primarily in the team's administrative role and as primary pilot, while also being trained in other skills. Brad's hometown was DeLucia. Vickers was recruited into STARS. After its 1996 founding, an elite counterterrorism, search and rescue, and counternarcotics unit within the Raccoon Police Station. STARS was funded through private investment by local businesses and hired professionals from outside the police force. While known for his timid behavior, he made up for it by serving multiple roles. As a qualified helicopter pilot, he transported the Alpha team around the city. As a computer expert, he could deal with obtaining digital evidence. Trained in chemical protection, it was also his job to deal with hazardous substances. When on patrol, he took one of two rear security positions. Dario Rosso was a salesman who was with his family during the Raccoon City destruction incident. Almost nothing is known about Dario other than that he wanted to be a novelist, but due to his mother's influence, he resigned from his dream and became a salesman instead. He and his family were apparently not local residents of Raccoon City, as Dario was registered at the Apple Inn, suggesting he was in town on business, was consumed by an epidemic that turned most of the population into zombies. Dario and his family were forced to fend for themselves, attempting to escape the encroaching infected hordes through the ruined streets of Raccoon City without protection or chance of aid. Sometime during the collapse of the city between September 26 and 28, Dario's mother, wife, and daughter were killed in the chaos. Being the lone survivor of his family, when Dario finally reached the safety of the warehouse, he was already a completely broken and scared man. Captain Mikhail Victor was a mercenary contracted by the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, UBCS, where he served as leader of the Delta Platoon. He was warm-hearted, recognized for his impressive leadership abilities, and skilled in the planning and execution of operations. Originally from Leningrad, in the Russian SFSR, Victor served his compulsory national service in the Soviet Army. He continued after the mandatory 2 years was up. While it is possible he attained the rank of captain, this is uncertain. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the army was largely demobilized, and Victor and many others were rendered unemployed in a country reeling from economic ruin. Soon the new Russian Federation experienced tense conflict as ethnic minorities fought for their independence. Victor became involved due to his wife, who was from one such ethnic group, and offered his support and experience to the rebel cause. During the conflict, Victor was directly responsible for a number of attacks, which included massacres of civilians. In the mid-1990s, after the capture and death sentence his group by the Russian government, Victor was approached by the Umbrella Corporation, who offered him an amnesty deal. He then agreed to join the company's UBCS in exchange for his freedom and the guaranteed safety of his men. Nikolai Zinoviev, codenamed Silver Wolf, is a Soviet Army veteran who served in Umbrella's paramilitary as a sergeant in the UBCS, as well as a monitor. He and the USS Commando Hunk were considered to be rivals, and he was a close friend of Colonel Sergei Vladimir, whom he may have served with in the Soviet Army. Zinoviev was born in Moscow, capital of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. Per Soviet laws on national service, he likely served in the Soviet Army from 1981, and is known to have been in one of its Special Forces brigades. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, Zinoviev was retired and, along with many other former Soviet soldiers, was recruited by Umbrella. Little is known of Zinoviev's career in the mid-1990s, though he was well trusted by Colonel Vladimir and knew of Umbrella's need for him in their Tyrant project. Zinoviev served Umbrella and Colonel Vladimir in two ways. Officially, he was a sergeant within the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, an anti-BOW force. Unofficially, he was part of Colonel Vladimir's Internal Affairs Bureau and spied on the UBCS. Raccoon City was a town under the thumb of Umbrella. The virus washed over the city like a tidal wave and in its wake left a living hell filled with ungodly creatures. Raccoon City was an industrial city located in the Midwestern United States. It was best known as the home of the pharmaceutical conglomerate Umbrella Corporation, which by 1998 employed approximately 30% of the city's population. In September 1998, Raccoon City became the epicenter of a viral outbreak later known as the Raccoon City Incident, caused by the T-virus. The catastrophe culminated on October 1, 1998, when the U.S. government carried out the sterilization strategy, a missile strike that completely destroyed the city in an effort to contain the infection. At present, The remains of Raccoon City are sealed off from the public, with access restricted exclusively to U.S. government personnel. Urbanization took off rapidly in the late 1960s, either as a result of Umbrella Pharmaceuticals moving into the area or by coincidence. During this decade, the city saw the construction of a tram line linking it to Stoneville and the Arkley Mountains, while the Kite Brothers Railway constructed a subway system, opened in 1969. Also in this year was the establishment of the Raccoon Police Department, RPD, as a municipal police force and construction of the Raccoon Police Station, though the Arkley County Sheriff's Department, ASD, had a continued presence in the area. With the economic boom aided by Umbrella's continued investment in the city into the 1980s, the company town had expanded far beyond its 1950s limits and was fast becoming a tourist spot, taking in out-of-state hikers, and the subway had expanded to encompass 8 stations. A river dock was also established along the circular river following Umbrella's arrival. The city suffered from the 1990 to 1991 recession. However, though this was in part reversed by Mayor Michael Warren's Bright Raccoon 21 plan, a city revival project which was funded heavily by Umbrella. The Raccoon General Hospital was constructed in 1992 as part of this project, while another hospital in the mountains was closed the next year due to a scandal linked to the company. Gaining control of the town, Umbrella financed the creation of an independent law enforcement agency known as the Special Tactics and Rescue Service, STARS. In 1996, this organization consisted of military veterans and scientific experts, and was meant to carry out criminal investigations that the RPD was not capable of handling, such as counterterrorism or riot control. The return of the 4 stars. Veterans and their pilot Brad Vickers caused a serious problem to the company's control of Raccoon City. They were able to slow down any official police investigation due to their control over the mayor and chief of police Brian Irons, but made plans to assassinate the stars. Officers if it was found they were conducting an unofficial investigation. STARS itself was shut down and replaced with Raccoon SWAT. Redfield, Chambers, and Burton left the city for their own reasons, while Valentine continued her investigation within the city. Over the course of September, the T-virus made its way into Raccoon City, largely due to Dr. William Birkin allowing nearby Umbrella facilities to be contaminated to prevent them from stopping him handing over the experimental Golgotha virus to the U.S. military. By September 16, the Raccoon General Hospital had wards locked down to slow the spread of the T-virus, which was understood by its local name as the cannibal disease. On the night of Tuesday, September 22, Dr. Birkin was attacked by an Umbrella Security Service team sent to retrieve the sample. This led to a series of events that culminated in the T-virus contaminating into Victory Lake via infected rats and entering the water supply. The city was put under martial law by the U.S. Department of Defense on September 24 as tens of thousands of residents mutated into zombies. The United States Army, the Army National Guard, and the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, UBCS, were sent to supplement the efforts of the ASD, the RPD, and the Raccoon City Fire Department, RFD, in the evacuation of civilians. Despite the efforts, the infection continued without major opposition. The U.S. Army and Army National Guard actually had the soldiers stationed in the outskirts of the city to prevent anyone discovering the government's deal with Birkin from coming out. By the night of Tuesday, September 29th, the city was overwhelmed and the Raccoon Police Station was itself abandoned. Following an emergency meeting in Congress over what to do to control the outbreak, the president made the highly controversial decision to fire an experimental thermobaric missile at the city. The operation began after daybreak on Friday, October 1st, destroying the entire city. The official death toll was over 100,000. The president resigned after this event, faced with public outrage at his decision to destroy the city. The further the outbreak progressed, the more the quarantine zone widened. Some people left those areas to steal and take what was necessary, leading to multiple confrontations against the authorities. What was left of Raccoon City and the surrounding area was locked down to contain any surviving biohazardous material. A government research outpost was constructed at the center of the ruined city, in which surviving material could be cataloged for research. The destruction of Raccoon City had global ramifications. No longer committed to their illegal investiture in bioweapons from Umbrella, the U.S. government turned on the corporation and banned Umbrella USA from conducting business before liquidating it. Umbrella was also faced with payment of compensation to victims' families. The corporation contested these lawsuits in what became as the Raccoon Trials, as the U.S. government played a role in the outbreak and made a policy of denying the existence of BOW. As a matter of national security, the actual evidence against Umbrella was contestable, and the trials continued into 2003, only concluded when Dr. Albert Weskier provided a sample of Umbrella's own research data, proving their guilt. The loss of the trial bankrupted the corporation while its CEO Oswell E. Spencer went into hiding to escape an arrest warrant from both the United States and Russian Federation. The actual nature of this data was classified, and the public at large was not aware of BOW. Until the Terragrigia panic in 2004,